Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Hopefully it's good for everyone. It's certainly good for me. I am so excited about today's webinar, Corporate Emissions with Climate Tech USA. I am very excited to be joined today by Vanessa Vasquez and Katie Williams. And I'm just going to jump right into it. I know some of you are here right on time, which is absolutely amazing. So let's get into it. Before I pass over the microphone, I am Allison Reeser. I am the Director of Sustainability and Innovation here at PSC. And we are so excited to do this webinar with you all today. A few Zoom housekeeping things. We are going to have a pretty interactive webinar today. So if Katie and Vanessa ask you a question, please go ahead and drop that into the chat feature where I think you see Katie just welcomed everyone in the chat. But if you want to ask a question at the end, which we will have time to do, please put that into the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, because that will help us facilitate it. All right, many of you I know are already familiar with PSC. We have an awesome member community, but for people who are maybe new to PSC or this is your first webinar, a little bit about the Pet Sustainability Coalition. We are a nonprofit really trying to drive positive environmental and social change in the pet industry. And we primarily do that through our work with our awesome members. We have about 200 members in 18 different countries, so we're worldwide. Some of our members are here. You can see that we have brands, we have retailers, we also have service providers and consultants and other experts like you'll hear about today. Some of the work that we do, we offer one-on-one support for our members. Think of us like a little project and consulting team, but we also try to drive that industry-wide coalition building stuff because really the issues that we're trying to tackle cannot be solved by one company alone. We do a lot of work in ingredients and packaging and social responsibility. So our topic today, greenhouse gas emissions, is really core to what we are doing. If it's not already on your calendar, please, please, please come to our Impact Unleashed event this March. I'm going to pause here a little bit, scan the QR code, make sure you get your tickets. Tickets are on sale right now. And this is really the premier event that we are going to be hosting in 2025, leading up to Global Pet Expo. We are lining up our speakers right now. We have a very exciting agenda, really focused on inspirational and exciting topics. So I really hope to see you there. And the last thing I'll say before we really get into it is that this is our free webinar series, and we are really leaning into this for 2025. So Climate Tech USA, again, a wonderful member of ours. I'm so excited that they are sharing their expertise with the whole community. This is our last event, a last webinar of 2024. And in 2025, we're really focusing our content on these pillars around ingredients and materials, packaging and waste, strategy and governance. So if you would love to see yourself up here on screen, please send us an email at membersupport@petsustainability.org, and we would love to plug you in with our 2025 webinar series. Okay, so that is enough about me and PSC. I'm so excited to turn over the microphone to Katie and Vanessa, and I will pop back in once we're at the Q&A. So feel free to take it away, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Allison, and welcome everyone. This webinar again is hosted by Climate Tech USA. We are a consultancy firm that helps corporate clients and recommends best-in-class software solutions. We offer a plethora of software options that we can assess for you based on your organization's specific needs. So we can do things like corporate carbon emissions, product stewardship from a life cycle analysis or product declaration perspective, as well as green marketing and sustainable packaging. So please reach out if you would like to schedule a call with us afterwards. And we are trusted by the world's leading brands here at Climate Tech USA. We have experience working with many Fortune 500 clients on projects, again, ranging from corporate emissions to life cycle analyses, environmental product declarations, and sustainable packaging. We align to leading global standards and reporting frameworks. We can help you get that data faster with less lift on your team, a really clear audit trail, and reliable data.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Vanessa Vasquez. A little bit of my background. I have experience in product compliance and prior work experience with IDEX Laboratories, a large veterinarian company. I also assist in software solutions for supply chain and product compliance, such as PFAS, packaging, and carbon emissions. Here at Climate Tech, we assist, consult, and help clients in these areas. Here I am with my dog Rocco, the big taco, we call him, over here, and really great. So happy to be a part of this community.
And hello again, everyone. My name is Katie Williams. I have a background in creative and communication strategy for organizations. I transitioned into sustainability in 2019 from marketing tech, and it's been a tremendous journey. But I'm happy to report that in my work with hundreds of clients, there are so many great people really trying to push sustainable initiatives in their organizations. So you're not alone in the work that you're doing to better our planet. I also want to call out, this is my Australian Shepherd, Daisy, and in that photo behind us, you can see she's doing some dock jumping. She actually won first place at our local dock jumping competition, and Daisy can jump 20 feet.
Awesome. So for today's agenda, we are going to cover just a bit of the science behind climate change, explain corporate emissions, product level emissions, and give real case examples from the pet industry. Just here, again, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. But the first one is going to be, what standards are you aligning to, and what regulations are coming up for most of you in your line of business? If you could please put them in the chat, we'd love to hear about that as well. Now let's dive into sustainability, specifically with the pet industry. The U.S. pet food industry has seen an increase in consumer demand for sustainable products, prompting companies to adopt carbon reduction practices voluntarily. This is driven by human demand. For example, we see these terms being used such as human grade ingredients, certified humane raised and handled, ethical, cruelty-free, free from animal byproducts. And what we'd like to highlight here are the numbers. For example, free from artificial ingredients grew 24% to reach 1.5 billion in total sales. Free from artificial preservatives grew 23% to 2.9 billion in sales. Meat as the first ingredient grew at a rate of 19% to 3.1 billion in sales. Here's an example of Yana, which is one of our customers in the EU. They label their small animal and rabbit food to show 110 compensation in CO2. This example shows the product lines are starting to use carbon emission data as a differentiator in the marketplace and a key label to ensure consumers that they're dedicated to carbon emission reductions. How was Yana able to figure out that they are carbon positive? They conducted an LCA, a life cycle assessment on their product, and this data is valid due to the LCA work done, and a record is kept at the corporate level.
And even better, perhaps, than the rapid growth in the sustainable pet products, the good news here is that there's also very high retention. Customers are sticking with these eco-friendly choices. Pet owners who buy natural pet food products that are labeled natural actually purchase 5 or more times a year. And we'll throw another question out to the group. We're going to transition here into corporate emissions. So how is your organization dealing with scopes 1, 2, and 3? We'd love to see some good dialogue from coalition members and guests in the chat for your specific vertical.
So now let us now move on to climate change. What is it? What's the science behind it? What are some key stats you can use in your organization to educate team members and raise awareness for better cross-functionality collaboration with sustainability. The Earth, let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, here we are. The Earth is warming, and this we can measure. And the reason the Earth is warming is due to human activity. This is fossil fuels. This is deforestation and industrial processes as the main driver. Science agrees, and we are taking a good look at the data here. For example, there are NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, the Hadley Center for Climatic Research, the NOAA, and then Berkeley Earth. These are all independent researches, all showing the same outcome. The Earth is warming due to human activity. Over 97% of publishing scientists agree. And science has also modeled different future scenarios based on this data. How severe will the effect of climate change be? You may have heard of the Paris Agreement. This agreement was to limit emissions to 1.5 degrees, meaning we had to cut our global emissions by 2030 and reach a net zero by 2050. This is a very mild scenario, and it was the best case scenario. Are we on track to meet the Paris Agreement? No. That's why you see the RCP pathways right here in this chart. They are representative concentration pathways. And again, different scenarios of how severe climate change will be. You might be looking at this chart and thinking RCP 8.5, that one's must be the worst case scenario. What pathway is it? We call that pathway business as usual. Yes, if we continue on, it represents a high emission future.
And of course, because we are working within the animal sector here today, we wanted to throw out a question to the group. Does anyone know what type of tiger this is? Feel free to answer in the chat if you have an idea here. I don't want to spoil it. Okay, this is a South Asian tiger. It's one of the most endangered animals on the planet, and unfortunately, they're already most likely extinct. So when we're talking about climate change, we just want to reframe here that we're talking about more than just weather and more than just carbon. We're talking about entire ecosystems and all the life on our planet. We're actually talking about multiple systems collapse. The first things to go in these high pathway concentrations here would be the Iceland green sheet, the West Antarctic ice sheet, and so on. These systems are interconnected and they have multiple cascading effects, many of which are irreversible. And so we'll use an example here of a domino effect. When one system goes, it triggers another system. So this is very serious. The ocean right now is one of our largest carbon sinks. So all that carbon that's being trapped in our atmosphere, much of that is being taken in by our ocean, which of course means we're seeing vast ocean temperature rise. Entire ecosystems, such as shallow water coral, could go completely extinct by 2050 on our current pathway. And that's not even accounting for our waste problem, which of course includes microplastics, much of which ends up in our waterways and ocean. So to wrap up this section on the science of climate change, we live on a sphere. It really is all connected. We have a social and moral imperative to act now. So no matter what role you have within your organization, whether you're a sustainability manager, you work in operations, you can truly make a difference. And today we hope to give you some tips how.
So now we're going to talk about corporate emissions as it relates at the corporate level. Feeding dogs and cats in America alone has been calculated to be as environmentally damaging as pumping the exhaust of nearly 14 million cars into the atmosphere for 1 year. When we think about carbon emissions, This data is likely going to live across various departments of your organization. If your organization is new to sustainability, if you're a sustainability manager trying to start a change at your organization, even if you have nothing to do with sustainability, there are still some key departments that you want to get to know. Set up an intro chat with your leaders of the team. Find out how they're putting together and capturing key data points and addressing sustainability within your workplace. If your organization is in the middle of your sustainability journey, you're likely already in contact with these teams and perhaps are already manually starting to put together strategies for your organization, as well as collect data. We heard many refer to this as herding cats. And of course, we here at Climate Tech advocate for the most high-tech solutions to help streamline these efforts. So if you're far along in the sustainability journey, or maybe you're just starting it with your organization, we really believe in using software automation to help us get there. Now we're going to talk, and this is a cheat sheet of corporate emissions. In the prior slide, we highlighted the key departments and the data that you can use. Now we're going to show you how that is worked. Direct is scope 1 and 2. Indirect is scope 3. Scope 1, these are direct emissions that come from sources owned and controlled by the company. For example, emissions from company vehicles, on-site manufacturing processes, or fuel used for heating in company-owned buildings. Scope 2, these are indirect emissions that come from the generation of purchased electricity, steam, heating, cooling that the company uses. Although the company doesn't produce these emissions themselves, they are responsible for the energy consumption. Scope 3, these are indirect emissions that come from the entire value chain. This includes emissions from the production of purchased goods, transportation, waste disposal, employees commuting, and even the end of the product sold by the company. Scope 3 emissions are usually the largest and hardest to measure. Why is this data helpful? How does it apply to me as an individual in the organization? Say I'm a small manufacturer and not a large corporation. Why do we want this data? How can it be helpful? It's important to use this data as you grow. You can use energy savings, save a ton of money, help with risk mitigation, save money from non-compliance, help your products get into and stay in other markets, and engage investors and customers as you grow.
Now, one facet of scope 3 emissions are the emissions of your suppliers, as many of you know. So your scope 3 emissions are the scope 1 and 2 of many of your suppliers. So I'm sure many of you have hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers from all across the globe. Supply chain engagement is when you collaborate really closely with your suppliers to help reduce their emissions and in turn, reduce your own scope 3 emissions. So you can really help your suppliers here learn the science behind climate change, the why, help them with best practices on data collection, help them set their own emission reduction targets and implement those best practices. Some key strategies here include offering comprehensive training for your suppliers, providing incentives on lowering emissions, and collaborating very closely together on sustainability goals. Question for the audience: how do you engage and educate your suppliers to track their emissions?
Great, next slide. So now we're going to segue into global reporting frameworks. And again, these are, all this information, you have to collect the data in the first place. The reporting frameworks are Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, SASB, means Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, TCFD, and CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. Why? First of all, again, we're seeing that these are starting to become mandates, driving reporting mandates globally. They also are supply chain transparencies. Governments are now increasing for companies to target Scope 3 emissions, which account for the largest share in industries like the pet food industry. Consumer demand. Growing pressure for clear environmental labeling is prompting governments to legislate emissions reporting across food sectors. You probably heard the buzz about CSRDs, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive out of the EU. And again, it's important to look at your organization, collect the data appropriately so that you can adhere to these global compliance frameworks and standards. Now we're going to talk about product stewardship at the product level.
Oh, hey, can we go back one slide? Sorry about that.
Sure. Oh, we forgot this one right here. Yeah, go ahead. So CSRD, again, this will apply to about, right now, about 50,000 companies. These standards are companies to disclose many facets of sustainability, also climate reporting. And starting in 2025, any company with a subsidiary in the EU must meet this certain criteria. So again, some of us are here in the US, some of us have, we're selling to the EU, it just depends. It's really important to really focus on understanding these regulations as they apply to, expanding your organization. For example, if you're here in the US, you have the SEC ruling. If you're in the EU, you have another report, and of course, Canada. And I think we just woke up today and there was a new reporting standard out of Hong Kong. So it just shows you how important it is to have a really streamlined process underneath your hood so that you could adhere to these standards. So now we're going to talk about product compliance, product stewardship at the LCA level. Here we have product lifecycle analysis. And at the LCA level, there is also a carbon emission scope there as well. For example, when you're starting to, for example, the previous example we had shown was Yana Pet Food, one of our customers. Again, they did a product lifecycle analysis at the product level. And in that calculation, you can also have an analysis to choose the best products or the best ingredients that have the lowest carbon emission. We really are advocates in the design process. For example, we work with software that can do bulk scale of an LCA. And we also have another LCA project where they are generating over 13,000 EPDs in a very short time frame, just a few months. Again, with really great software, you could start to adhere to global standards at the product level. And really start to say, okay, what materials maybe have a lower emission versus another one.
And we've had a lot of customers asking us about green certifications that can be trusted, not greenwashing, especially in relation to carbon emissions data. So we'd like to go over just a few of our favorites. So here's a list of just a few of our favorites. If you would like to see our full cheat sheet, please reach out. And in regards to that compliance slide earlier, I know the Hong Kong standard just came out. If you'd like to see our cheat sheet on global regulations, please reach out as well. So in regards to certifications with an emphasis on carbon emissions solutions, we'd like to call out the Fair Trade certification. This focuses mostly on fair labor practices and ethical sourcing, but there's also an environmental sustainability component. And products must utilize fair trade suppliers and undergo an audit. So what that means is you would need to be looking at your energy, water, and waste and carbon emissions data. B Corp is an awesome certification, and that also evaluates your company's carbon emissions and overall environmental impact. A life cycle analysis, an LCA, is also strongly recommended here. The Cradle to Cradle certification framework requires you to submit your energy, water, waste data. So again, looking at that same carbon emissions data, they'd also like a focus on renewable energy and material reutilization. Again, you're going to have to undergo an audit, so a really clear audit trail is needed, and a life cycle analysis is recommended as well. The Rainforest Alliance certification is based on sustainable agricultural standards, but that also emphasizes climate smart agricultural practices, as well as biodiversity, conservation, and worker human rights. Again, life cycle analyses and EPDs here, they're not mandatory, but they can help support compliance, enhance your credibility, and offer market differentiation. And again, if you'd like our full cheat sheet, just reach out after the webinar. Now we'd like to get just a little bit into AI and automation. I've heard so many folks here in the tech industry saying that the AI wave is almost like the dot-com boom in the 90s. It's a brave new world here, lots of new technology coming out. AI and automation can help your team gather, analyze, and report environmental data faster and more accurately. So that's going to improve your overall efficiency in tracking the goals, and it's going to help you reduce your error rate on the data. These technologies can allow for real-time insights, predictive analyses, and really seamless integration with your current systems. And ultimately, that enables you to be more effective in your decision-making. And for folks on the ground here, reduce your time on that manual data collection. So if you think back to our herding cats slide, we don't want you to be herding cats here. We want to make it really, really quick and seamless. And so what's coming out with AI, it is amazing, the new technologies that are coming out. And if you would like to take a look, please reach out to us. And thank you so much for your time today. We are happy to share, again, our full list of those global climate rules and green certifications with you. We do help our clients vet the newest software solutions, especially in AI. So we'd love to help you if you have a specific need there. Again, we are Climate Tech USA. That's climatetech-usa.com. You're welcome to reach out to Vanessa or I. We've thrown our emails in here, and we're also on LinkedIn. We'd really love to meet you and learn more about the work that you're doing in the sustainable pet space and the projects that you're passionate about. Thanks so much.
Yay! I'm just going to give a round of applause for everybody who can't actually make a sound on this webinar. Thank you both so much. So we can officially move into the Q&A section. So for all of our audience, go ahead and use that Q&A feature, not the chat feature, because that's what I'm keeping my eye on. So while people are typing their questions, I actually have a few questions that came up. First of all, you both surprised me with the herding cats animation. I'm such a cat person, and I didn't see that when we did our dry run before. So what an excellent addition, first of all. So my first question is that PSC does offer greenhouse gas inventory support, but the way that we do it is with spreadsheets. I'll be honest and say that. Our team knows about the greenhouse gas protocol, so we work with members to kind of find all that data, put it into the spreadsheet, find the right emissions factors, and spit out the result. So I guess I just wanted to ask you kind of some of the pros and cons of using a software to do those calculations versus doing it more manually like we do.
You know, I know your cheat sheet, your Excel. I think it's fantastic that you put it together, right? And I think, you know, I refer to it as well. So again, we slide in software that will help. And again, we always work in kind of reverse engineering. We like to say, okay, if an auditor came in and audited you guys, it's always good to have a software there, just like we do our taxes, right? So I believe you're going to need both. Sometimes you want to use that Excel spreadsheet. I think it's a great cheat sheet. But then again, as you start building and depends on where you are, you're going to want to have something that's solid there in case you ever do get audited. So we really believe in that, to have that audit trail. And you could use both. But as you grow, it's always good to try and streamline these processes as we grow. Like, for example, today we woke up with a new Hong Kong requirement. And it's really great to have software that can be manipulated to meet those standards as they come along.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll jump in here as well. Having worked with many different clients who are cataloging their corporate data manually, if you're a global organization or you have many different locations, you know how hard it is. It really is like herding cats from different departments. We have one client who's using our corporate emissions software, and they're able to automate over 1.5 million invoices every month. So again, that's when you're looking at corporate emissions, you all know this, it's your energy, water, waste invoices. And this is a global client. So one issue that you might run into manually is when you have invoices in many different languages, right? Handwritten invoices. Well, AI, it is growing so fast. AI can parse and read all this information very quickly. So for those of you, again, in global organizations that have locations all over the world, it really is game changing. AI is revolutionizing every industry. So just that stat again is 1.5 million invoices every month for one client alone.
As someone who has gone through and like pulled out the kilowatt hours from like
Yes.
PDFs of bills, that sounds amazing. Um, I wanted to come back to the Hong Kong reporting framework. Why are there so many different frameworks? Is it possible, like, could we have just one, or are there benefits to a bunch of different countries having their own standard?
So it'd be easier if it was just one, right? Across the board. But I think everybody's, every country is running its own show. So you just have to have good data and good software that can adhere to those standards, right? So it's the same data, but you have to reconfigure for that particular framework. So I think that's why we advocate software and of course us as consultants. The software is there to be our assistant, right? As these new frameworks go. And again, you want to have your audit trail. So I just think it's, everybody's running a little bit. It'd be much easier if it was one standard across the board. Yeah.
And I think that another reason that we have so many different frameworks and standards is because there are varied goals and metrics. So, some standards are focused purely on reducing emissions, like the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Others are focused more on financial risk, like TCFD. Others are focused more on adaptation and resilience, like and others are focused more on, biodiversity or ecosystem restoration. So we have, again, like lots of countries with lots of different specific issues. And like Vanessa said, it would be great if we had one standard, but right now we are operating under many different standards. And that's why having software that can especially help with predictive insights. So one of the software tools that we work with, they're actually able to offer real-time insights on the different frameworks and the different rules that are coming out. So, I recently saw yesterday the Hong Kong ruling. And so if you're not checking the news every day or checking LinkedIn every day, or, this is a really smart way to get insights on which rules are coming out. And I think we can expect to see more and more rules and regulations, especially country specific, coming out in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. And actually, so I'm realizing there's kind of a language thing happening. When we say a standard or a reporting framework, we're typically talking about something that's voluntary, right? Whereas like CSRD, there's like a whole separate bucket of compliance by law acronyms that we have. Do those two things talk to each other well? The voluntary standards and the compliance by law side of things?
If you're a Fortune 500, yes, right? So within those requirements that are mandatory, you have to meet a certain financial threshold. Some of the clients are not there. Manufacturers are not at that threshold, so it's voluntary. But if you again are growing your organization, you want to take again, we see all the benefits. For right now, it's voluntary unless you are a Fortune 500 sitting there, and then it becomes a mandatory. But again, like I had mentioned, the data is all the same, right? You have to get it ready and prepared, and then it will be either mandatory or voluntary. It just depends on how you grow your organization and if you meet those financial requirements.
Gotcha. Well, and I just want to do a quick shout out. I know from looking at the chat, many of the people here have done their voluntary scopes 1 and 2, sometimes 3. So congrats to the folks that are working on it. And I know, I hope we get to keep working with you all on this. I do see a few questions in the Q&A, so let's make sure we address those. Someone asks, Climate Tech, do you integrate directly with any of the veterinary distributors or procurement platforms? Or in other words, do you have an open API for customers to easily integrate?
An open API.
Open API. Okay.
I always advocate flexibility with all the software vendors that we work with. Yeah.
Great. We have another question here about how does one handle third-party verification of data? Kind of an open-ended one, but I would love to hear your answer.
So we are not the third-party auditor. If we were, we'd be talking a different talk, right? A different presentation here. So we collect all the data, and then you, as your organization, would have to submit it to the third-party auditors that are standard in the industry, and they will give the stamp of approval. We do not do that, but we get everything up and ready and prepped so that you can submit that for a third-party audit.
Could you talk through the scenarios when you would or maybe would not need a third-party audit or verification?
Well, that's a tricky one too. If you are, it's usually, it depends on the organization. If you are a Fortune 500, you definitely are going to want to have a third-party auditor audit. But yes, you're gonna, even if you're not, it's just a standard process that you should. So I usually advocate that you do that, even if you're maybe a B Corp at this time, maybe you're rolling up. The small to mid-sized manufacturers, just depends, right? How are you using that data? What is your initiative at your corporate level?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and say that there are, of course, the mandatory reporting requirements. So certain governments are going to require companies above certain thresholds to verify their compliance with environmental laws. But then there's also the voluntary reporting. So if if you've publicly committed to net zero goals or science-based targets, that could also require third-party audits to verify. Audits could also be needed for CDP. That's something that I've heard a ton. Lots of companies are asking for their suppliers to complete the CDP questionnaire. And if you're also going for like a B Corp status or any ISO, that's going to require environmental data and an audit as well. So if you think back to that slide on, all those different certifications you can get from like fair trade, right? Like those also require audits. And if you're currently cataloging all this data on a spreadsheet, you know how hard it is. Software can do it faster and better. So you have a very clean audit trail.
Great. I will say, I haven't played too much around with the software side of things. I'm very into the spreadsheets. And I do think that there is a point where a company probably graduates to a software.
Exactly.
Again, if their business is like getting complicated, if there are a lot of locations. So I think that I feel well equipped. Like a spreadsheet can handle a small company with just like a few locations. Of course, like software would be great for everybody, but I know budget is often an issue. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah. And we really try and help the small to mid-sized manufacturers too on that. So yes, we know budget's always an issue, but there's always an opportunity to learn and say, hey, how can I do it up to a certain point? And as we grow, we could slide in efficient software to help us as well.
Yeah.
And
So
outside of the size, Allison, I think it depends on the need, right? So some larger, especially larger companies and global companies will, in my opinion, definitely need software for the corporate carbon emissions. But even if you're a small manufacturer, you may be wanting to do a life cycle analysis, or your customers might be asking for environmental product declarations. So size doesn't really matter on the LCA or the EPD side. Software can really help streamline that, especially if you have a larger product line. You can streamline LCAs and EPDs. We had one customer create over 15,000 EPDs. using software within, I think it was like 3 months. And that's a process that would typically take years. So think about, if we're thinking corporate carbon emissions, where are your locations geographically? Where are your facilities? If you have locations all over the world, definitely look into software solutions. And then if you have a larger product line or you have customer demand for environmental product declarations, that's where you might want to look for software in those areas.
Great. Okay. We can keep this Q&A rolling for several more minutes. We just need to wrap up by the top of the hour, but we can wrap up sooner if the questions slow down. I do see one more, but audience, feel free to keep typing them in. I actually wanted to make sure, I'm always trying to be conscious of acronyms, and I see 3 on the screen right now. So I just want to make sure we define those. Product LCA, and LCA is a life cycle assessment. ESG report is environmental social governance. And I'm going to be honest, I don't remember what an EPD is.
Katie, you want to answer that one? The
Yeah,
EPD?
sure. And an EPD is an environmental product declaration.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. We have another question here in the chat. Do you work with co-manufacturers? Or I guess I think the question is about do you as Climate Tech USA work directly with a co-manufacturer or someone in a client supply chain, or is that client responsible for doing that outreach?
So it could be a mix. And it just depends. So we've had clients, it depends, right? If they're a manufacturer, but they're a third party, a distributor, right? So if they're a distributor, they're not really in charge of it. So they're just collecting the data through the supply chain. We could offer some solutions on that, but it's hard because you're not in control of your supply chain. You're just the third party. So there's usually, you really can't do what you're supposed to do, but we have had some scenarios there where, we can collect the data for them as well. We usually like to work with manufacturers that are committed to these efforts, and so therefore they're usually in control of their supply chain. And that's usually, it's hard when you're just the third party because you're not really making it. So you're just pushing it up the funnel. But it depends. There's always been an interesting case scenario on that. Again, who's in charge is where it really comes down to, and that's where you can make the most impact.
Yeah. Here's a good question, and more acronyms.
Yeah.
Is a PCF, a product carbon footprint, and an LCA, life cycle analysis, the same thing?
Well, it depends. I have to look at you could send me the requirements of what you're talking about there on the first one. But yes, there's some variations in that. And sometimes they cross over. So yes.
Yeah, I can jump in here and say
Yeah.
that they are similar, but not necessarily the same. So the PCF, the product carbon footprint, is typically related to the greenhouse gas emissions. So it could be cradle to grave, which is the entire life cycle, or it could be limited to specific stages like cradle to gate, like up to manufacturing. Whereas like a life cycle assessment, it can include multiple categories. So it can include the greenhouse gas emissions. It can also include resource depletion, like water, energy. It can also include ecosystem impacts and human health. So there are some key differences, but they're both very important.
Agreed. In my experience too, I mean, product carbon footprint, it's kind of in the name. What you're getting out of that is the carbon footprint. So very focused on emissions and carbon, whereas a life cycle analysis, the ones I've seen have so many different indicators that they're measuring. Some are about carbon, but they could be about labor or biodiversity. It can be a little bit more expansive.
And I think also that they relate to different standards, international standards. So the life cycle assessment is governed by the ISO standards. And then I think the product carbon footprint is governed by a couple different standards. But I know life cycle assessments are ISO.
Yeah. Good call out. So I'm wondering, let's say someone is here watching this webinar and they're like, oh shoot, I have never even thought about my scopes 1, 2, or 3. Maybe I should do something about it. In this hypothetical, like what is the first step that that person should do to start this journey?
You know, Allison, we could even go back in the slides to that slide that shows the different teams to talk to. I think that's so
Okay.
important. Like, if you're really getting started, I think having conversations with disparate teams in your organization is going to be really, really helpful. So, if you're trying to start a change from the ground up, get to know the people in these different teams. I would say facilities are really important. If you have multiple company facilities, that's where you're going to be getting your scope 1 and 2 emissions from, right? So we want to ask them about energy, about water usage, about waste. That's really the first place to start there. But then data can live in other teams, and other teams are also going to have a vested interest in this. Ask your legal team if you have a compliance team. Legal definitely should be involved in sustainability when we're thinking about compliance as well. So there's a lot of different teams that have a vested interest. And I would say that first step is getting the conversation going and kind of building your like core team of folks who have that data and who also might be interested in pushing sustainability initiatives at your organization. So I'll toss it over to Vanessa to see if she has
Yeah.
some input on this too.
So, like I said, the reason Katie and myself are always in cahoots here, she'll say it at the corporate level where I think supply chain is really important and how you manufacture, right? And I'm a big advocate of making improvements there and starting to take a look at your materials. That's why we say we advocate, hey, maybe we can build or manufacture better, right? And that's what software is here to help us do. So I really think if we want to make a huge difference, yes, it's at the facilities but it's also right at how we make products. How can we use better ingredients? How can we make our suppliers aware? Hey, what are you doing underneath the hood too? So I think those questions definitely falls in alignment. I'm a big proponent of supply chain improvements in this area and making ingredients better and manufacturing better. And Katie will come in and say, no, 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 let's make sure that the people start riding their bikes to work, right? So we go, okay, and all of it's important, right? How do we manufacture cleaner, better, and more efficient? And we see the benefits of that too, right, with the consumer. So underneath the hood, you just got to start asking some questions, put together some baselines. I love your Excel spreadsheets. I think, I love taking a quick look at it, right? But we also have software. Again, we're big advocates of reverse engineering. Let's see what we can do here and be in charge of to make improvements as we go along with software.
And to piggyback off that, Vanessa, it's such a great point. Thanks for bringing us back to the supply chain. One of the software tools that we work with can help you model out even in the design phase. So I think I'll even add to this list product design, the product design team, the research and development team. We can help you with software, like model out, like, well, what if I swapped out this ingredient? Like, how would that impact our emissions? How would that impact, the product? So there's a lot of different, swapping out the ingredients, the materials. You can model all of this even in the planning stage. So software can help you do that really efficiently.
And one more important point, Allison, we advocate LCA software that's for the non-LCA expert. Okay.
Mm.
We all know how hard these sciences are, and we are big advocates to say, hey, even if you don't have a PhD in this, there's software that can be simplified for you so that you can still make really good choices through your supply chain.
Great. I keep on coming up with questions, so I'm just gonna ask away. Let's
Sure.
see if I can find, I don't remember where the scope here, this slide. One of the
Yeah.
questions I get the most often working with members is isn't, so if I'm a member and I'm trying to measure my scope 3, like shouldn't that be someone else's scope 1 and 2? So I think like very smart people are realizing that there is overlap. So I guess like in the grand scheme of all companies measuring things, how do we make sure we're not double counting?
Well, that's where software comes into place. right?
But I guess so if I'm one company and I'm measuring my scope 1, 2, and 3 and I put that in my impact report, but then one of my suppliers also publishes an impact report with their scope 1, 2, and 3, like there is some overlap there. So like if we were trying to measure the overall greenhouse gases of the whole pet industry, how would we do that without overlap?
Yeah. Well, that's a tricky question, right? Off the bat, because you got to take a look at all the data and say, okay, where is the overlap? Like, what are you saying, and what is that particular supplier saying to you upstream, right? Downstream. So you're going to have to probably go into those anomalies and really take a look at why that's happening, and maybe talk to your supplier and say, hey, you shouldn't be calculating that's not accurate, or vice versa, right? Maybe you're doing a calculation that doesn't match up either because you're getting wrong data. So we see that a lot, right? Wrong data. And that's why we advocate software, but we all also advocate consultants, right? Because then you say, hey, all right, software brain, you messed up here. What's going on here, right? And the same thing could be said about how that particular partner is doing their collections as well. So, it's kind of, yeah, you got to take a look at that and see the anomalies and break it down.
Mhm.
And Allison, could we go to that supply chain engagement slide, please? Just like Vanessa said, I think
Sorry, which one was it?
Yeah.
supply chain engagement, it should be after the corporate
Okay,
emissions, I think. There it is.
here we go.
Yeah, so like Vanessa was saying, just make sure that you're using primary data from your suppliers instead of relying on secondary or like generic data. And that means that you need to engage very deeply with your suppliers. So vet your suppliers. If you have existing suppliers, help them to understand, why are we reporting this? Because yeah, like their scope 1 and 2 emissions is your scope 3 emissions. And that's based on like the frameworks that we're using. So that's based on, the greenhouse gas protocol, scope 3 standard, and the ISO standards for greenhouse gas reporting.
Great. One of the things I advocate for too is like clearly defining boundaries. So if someone like me wants to read your report, I can very clearly understand like where the numbers are coming from. Is it your scope 1? Is it your scope 2? Which category of your scope 3? And like including all of that nerdy detail in
Yeah.
your report so that someone can fully understand how you did your calculation. That's my dream.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you 100%, right?
Yep.
So you got to do
um,
the work though, and you have to collect good data, and you'll also collect bad data. And you got to know what the difference is, right? As you build it. Um,
yeah.
and you have to get audited too as well. So they're going to take a look at that as well.
Real fast, do you have an example of what is good data versus bad data?
No, because it's each client's different, right? So when we come in, we could say, hey, we could tell you experiences, just an overview, but we can't really give you any clients. But through experience, they just maybe they wanted to collect data, and they hired a foreign entity to collect that data, and they didn't even have any clue what was going on. So we'd come in and go, what is this? And we have to verify it, and then you start to realize, oh, they just slapped it together.
Right.
So that's why we advocate what we do. And consultants are not going to lose their jobs with AI or anything like that, right? You got to take a hard look at it, and make sure things are accurate.
And I
Right.
would say that like quality of data is really important. We don't want data with errors. And when you're thinking about, especially like, let's say your energy or your water or your waste data, you're cataloging, like you just said, Allison, the kilowatt hours every month, right? Who's doing that? Is that a human? Are they typing it in? Is it like an administrative assistant at a facility who doesn't care about the carbon emissions and they're just typing this in really fast? If you put one extra zero on those kilowatt hours, you're going to have a very different story that you're telling. So I would definitely advocate for software, just to make sure that you do have that high quality data and you can really trust the data that's coming out of these emissions reports.
Yep. I
And
also think
also with our data, they will scan it. So when you go in to review, right, you'll have the actual receipt right there, right? And that's why we advocate. I mean, it's hard to do it with Excel spreadsheets, right? But if you have software that goes in there, you could open up the box and go, okay, let me see the actual receipts. You can take a look at that.
Yeah. I find too attention to detail is really helpful because if you have the electricity bill for 11 out of 12 months, that's like a flag. It's like, what, why is this missing? I find that like missing data is what I encounter a lot as well. I think that you can tell everyone here is into data. We're perhaps a little bit nerdy, and this has been a really fun chance to chat. I want to lob one final question to you. If someone wants to understand what your software costs, or maybe see a demo of what it actually looks like, what should they do?
Just reach out to us. You know, we don't advocate just one. We advocate 4 or 5 softwares. And we are always the door is always open. We have no problem walking you through a demo, and so that you can learn as well what's out there. And then we can get you, we can review with you pricing and find out where you're at. So definitely reach out to us, and the door is always open, even if you're just interested in learning as well. We're big advocates of learning as much as possible, as you know. You could go get the degree, but you got to do the work day and day, right? So that work is hard. It's complicated. It's nerdy, definitely nerdy, but we love what we do. We're dedicated to the mission, and just reach out to us, and we're more than happy to walk you through anything that would be helpful for you.
And
Awesome.
a lot of folks I find, are afraid to ask for a demo because they'll say like, well, we're not ready to buy software today. And that's totally okay. If you're even just curious to see what's going on in AI for sustainability, we're happy to show you. We help clients vet different software solutions. So like Vanessa mentioned, we represent different software solutions, and we can help you pick the ones that make the most sense for your specific problems.
Great. So everyone write down Katie and Vanessa's email if you would like to send any follow-up questions or ask for that demo if you're curious. And I think that brings us to a wrap. A quick plug too, if you're not a member with PSC, we offer a lot of support with greenhouse gases, lots of different stuff, no matter where you're at with your sustainability journey. So if you're not a member, write down Danny's email here and shoot him a message. He can help you get started. And I guess like in the remaining minutes, Katie and Vanessa, what parting message would you like to leave the audience with?
Again, thank you so much, Allison. And, we're Climate Tech USA. We are consultants first, and we believe in software to help us on our journey to net zero. And I know we're going to get there. We're going to start making improvements in all areas of manufacturing. Definitely reach out to us. We're always happy just to get to know everyone here. We're a big proponent of pet sustainability organization here, and hope to meet you in person as well.
Yeah. Katie?
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Vanessa and I, we both love our pets. I know that everybody on this call, like, we love our pets. We want to have sustainable products for our pets to use, and also a world that's livable for ourselves and our children and our pets. So the work that you do is really, really important for the future of our planet. And Vanessa and I are very curious people, so we would just love to hear what you're working on. Even if you're not shopping for software, we love to network, and maybe we'll see you at some conferences here, like the Pet Sustainability Coalition Conference Unleashed. I love that name. Another plug for Unleashed. But we just thank you for joining. We look forward to continuing the conversation.
Great. Thank you both so much, and thank you everyone for attending. I learned a lot and really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Allison. Everyone, have a great day. Take care.
Bye.